Chapter 3, Understanding Audiences and Publics. Key concepts for this chapter are analyze and adapt to your audience, literal versus rhetorical audience, marketing versus engagement, the audience as the public, and ethical responsibility to the audience. So, analyze your audience. So, the first things we're going to talk about today are to think about your audience and to analyze your audience. So, the things you have to think about is who is in the audience. Consider the people that you have in the audience. You want to consider what are their beliefs, their values, their experiences, and their motivations. So you can try to answer some of these questions. You're not going to know all of these questions, but you might think about these questions as the who, what, where, when, and whys. Who is the audience? What opinions do you think your audience already have about your topic? Where are you addressing the audience? What things about the context or the occasion might influence your audience members' interests and dispositions? When are you addressing the audience? This is not just a matter of the time of day, but also why your topic is timely for the audience. And why would your audience be interested in your topic? Why should these people make a particular judgment, change their minds, or take a specific action? In other words, how does your goal intersect with their interests, concerns, and aspirations? So, audience analysis, as in the literal audience analysis, or literally, who are the members of your audience? Who are you addressing? So when we think about the literal analysis of your audience, you're talking about the basic demographics. You're talking about things like gender, age, race, socioeconomic status, religious beliefs, nationality, political commitments, sexual orientation, educational level, occupation, income. These literal things. There are some limitations of demographics, though. A lot of times we're not going to know all of these things about our audience. It's going to be incomplete or it's going to be inaccurate. We're not going to know these things. We know physical characteristics about them, but we're not going to truly know the beliefs about our audience. So we'll know external things, but not internal things about them. So it's not going to tell us what they're going to really think about our topic. We're going to make assumptions and we're going to make some stereotypical guesses based on what we know about their demographics, but we're not going to truly know what our audience is going to think about our topic based on these things. And then we think about our public speaking class, and then it gets really tricky because there may be a broad range of people, and we may be in very different places in our lives. And other than being in public speaking class, and in college, some people may have full-time jobs, some people may not, some people may have families, some people may not. So there may be a very diverse mix there. Although demographics can be useful, you shouldn't assume that you automatically know what someone thinks or values because that person is female or male, or Chinese or Jewish, or 15 or 50, or a college professor or a plumber. Instead, you should take the diversity of your audience as a clue to the diversity your speech must address. So, audience analysis, the rhetorical method. So the rhetorical thought with audience analysis. Speakers can make better speech choices by focusing on the audience they want to create rather than just the demographic characteristics of the bodies sitting in the room. It's not the audience you're given that should guide your choices, it's what you make of the audience. What makes your speech effective is your skill in designing the persuasion that provides you with an audience suitable for persuasion, or rhetorical audience. Okay, so which argument should I use? Which evidence should I offer is always what should make the point best for my rhetorical audience. How do you create a rhetorical audience? By addressing them in a certain way, you can create a particular relationship, a particular us. You already are familiar with the idea of addressing an audience because you do it interpersonally. When you greet someone, you use some form of address. To a friend, it might be hiya. To the clerk at the convenience store, it's likely to be hi. To a teacher, it's hello. The same process operates with creating the rhetorical us in the speech situation. So the point about rhetorical audiences is that you're not simply bound to what a demographic analysis can tell you. You can also invite the audience to relate to your topic through a different lens. The ways that you may invite an audience to engage in a topic are bound only by your rhetorical imagination and creativity. So, if you look in your book, it's page 54 in the chapter. It's the as test. How do you figure out what audience to create? You can start with demographics and ask yourself about likely roles that cut across categories and include the whole group. From among those roles, ask yourself which ones would make your audience members more open to changing their perspective on the topic. Or you can start with the topic intuitively thought was appropriate to this group and try to imagine the different possible audience roles for which you could possibly design the arguments. A useful tool for choosing rhetorical audience is the as test. For example, instead of addressing your audience members as in their roles as 20-somethings and college students, you could address your audience as Americans, citizens, consumers, music lovers, achievers, compassionate people, curious people, voters, taxpayers, drivers, people who care about their health. Many more roles are possible. In principle, a rhetorical conception of your audience allows you to pick a role or perspective that not only helps them relate to your topic, but also invites them to forge commonalities despite demographic differences. The limitation to the rhetorical audience is that you can't magically make the audience into something that you want it to be. You will have to use judgment about what roles you think your audience might be willing to assume. So the rhetorical audience, it kind of gives you some options there. And the types of rhetorical audiences, you have options. So let's look at some general kinds of audience. These categories can be useful to you in thinking about your choices about how to develop a topic. Do understand that sometimes you have different kinds of people in your audience. Sometimes you have sympathetic audiences. Rhetorical audiences already see their interests aligned with yours. You can just add to or amplify the agreement. Adding information, adding substance, these people already agree with you. Then there are apathetic audiences. Apathetic audience members do not care about your topic. They don't know they should care about it. They don't want to care about it. They don't care. They're the trickiest sometimes because at least the people that don't agree with you care about the topic. These people just don't care at all. Hostile audiences, sometimes rhetorical audiences are fairly sure they do know what their interests are, and they are completely opposite of what yours are. They challenge you sometimes while respecting their understanding of their own interests. They completely disagree with you. Then there's occasional audiences. These are audiences that have gathered for a specific purpose. Sometimes it's a special occasion, and their expectations are dictated by that. If you speak at a funeral, attendees are interested in hearing you remember or praise the deceased. If you speak at a graduation, it's in order to honor the graduates. On such occasions, you're free to talk about whatever you want to talk about in these events, and it's more creative. And we've talked about the as test and the rhetorical distance already. So adapt to your audience, identify common interest, highlight shared experiences. It's always a good idea anytime you can kind of find a connection within your audience. Focus on mutual assumptions. And be directive. Anytime that you can bring to the surface points to your argument, your audience may share some common assumptions. Bringing these to the surface can provide points to support your argument. Getting the right courses is important, or we wouldn't have so much work to the registration process. Be directive. Your creation of the audience can be normative. You can tell your audience who they should be. So you can kind of be really specific with your audience. So then there's marketing versus engagement. So the conceptions of the literal audience and the rhetorical audience imply different approaches to interacting with an audience. We all live in a sea of advertising and marketing, and we're totally familiar with that, of course. We see that all the time. Marketing is about convincing audiences to change their behavior based on something that they're doing currently. So one thing that you can do is to draw a contrast, is to show that marketing is entirely legitimate activity. When you are selling something, your relationship to your audience has 4 specific characteristics. It's a one-way process. You're selling a product or a service. Your goal is not a dialogue or a conversation with the customer. You don't expect new ideas to be exchanged. You're just telling them what you're wanting them to do. There's demographic segments. Marketers divide their audiences into demographic segments: old, young, rich, poor, college educated, high school educated, urban, rural. Marketers are interested in difference in finding the specific groups of people most likely to buy their product. Stereotypes. Through research, marketers know who is most likely to want their soda, their pants, their car's big. There's stereotypes such as these, if based on solid research, can be highly reliable, but they are still just generalizations. Means to your end. In marketing, the audience members are means, not into an ends themselves, deserving of respect. Marketing is premised on using people rather than engaging them. Although a salesperson may try to convince people that she's helping them, which sometimes might be true, in the end, she just wants to sell her product because it's her job. Then there's engagement. Communication in any democratic framework requires genuine engagement, recognizable by everybody involved. So when you're engaging in someone, it's a two-way process. Unlike in marketing, you're just selling something to someone. In engaging, it's a two-way. It's back and forth. It's a response. Commonalities. Public speaking that's engaged has a commonality. You find something between the two people. You find something that's common. Instead, the democratic imperative is to talk the whole audience because everybody is part of the conversation. Self-risk. If you see your speech as a part of a larger dialogue, you approach it as someone in the audience might change your mind. You can test your speech choices using these self-risk tests described in Chapter 2. Are you putting your own beliefs and commitments at risk? Deserving respect. In the public dialogue, if you're speaking to an audience member who have little knowledge about your topic, it might be easy to mislead them, as we pointed out in Chapter 2. You can assess the integrity of what you're asking your audience to believe or do by imagining that this is an audience of experts. So even though the person might be new to the topic, they still deserve your respect. So the audience and the public. You create a public dialogue with the audience, which means a conversation. You engage the audience. You address common interests with the audience. And you consider the audience as a concerned public. So ethical responsibilities. As we talked about in the last chapter, you always have an ethical responsibility as a communicator. It is a habit, if you recall. It's something you must do habitually. You must choose your words carefully. Your words create worlds. So think about how powerful the words you use are. Consider the pace of circulation and create a benefit for everyone. Provide tools for informed choices. So help people make informed choices and empower the audience to take action. So when you are being a communicator, when you are helping an audience with a topic that you have chosen to persuade them on, help them know how to take an action in the end. So it's important to analyze your audience and adapt your speech accordingly to help it to make the most impact. Connect with your listeners and your audience, and choose engagement over marketing. Engage with your audience, develop a relationship with your audience. Don't just talk at your audience.